What's up, guys? It is a beautiful day. Bitcoin is pumping. The breakdown videos are out earlier than usual. What more could you want? Hopefully you're going to be able to find this video very useful today. We're going to be breaking down all of the main card fights from this weekend's card from a betting perspective, and hopefully you'll be able to use the information in this video to make better betting decisions, maybe even earn some extra cash. If you get a lot of value out of these breakdown videos, also please hit the like button. It helps boost the ranking on Google of these videos, so helps the channel grow. Really appreciate it. And also subscribe if you haven't already. If you like these breakdown videos for all of the main card fights and you want to watch my breakdowns for all the prelim matchups, you can head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com. And if you go to betting tips, pre-fight betting tips, you'll find a strategy guide and breakdown videos for every single fight on every single UFC card. If we look at like the Pavlovich Blades one, you scroll down, breakdown videos for every fight. So if you're betting the fights this weekend, you should find that useful. So make a living live betting on the UFC, and what I do is basically backed up by hours and hours of research, and I have very many years of experience. Been doing this for 14 years. Having said that, it's really difficult to make money betting on sports. When you go online, on Twitter, on Instagram, everyone seems to be making money. You see all those dickheads wearing Gucci tracksuits, big diamond chains, you know, hanging out with girls in bikinis, driving Rolls Royce cars, and we know that the real world isn't like that. To make money betting on sports, it's incredibly difficult. I'm chained to a desk 6 days a week, 10-12 hours a day. Very difficult. So understand, very important to do your own research. This is not an easy game we're playing, but all the information I'm sharing with you today does come from hours and hours of research, and is backed up by many years of experience. So you are in good hands. But let me know what you think in the comments below of, you know, how you see each of these fights playing out. We've obviously done really well this year. We've made, you know, really good profits. You know, hit a lot of winners since the beginning of the year. And I do have another bet to share with you in this video. Don't feel as confident in this one as, you know, many of the other bets I've shared on the channel this year, but I didn't feel particularly confident in Israel Adesanya a few weeks back, and he came through for us. So maybe our bet today will as well. Also, one more thing that I want to let you guys know about is I'll leave a link to my Instagram in the channel below, description below. I'm a lot more active on Instagram these days. You can see I post like lots of little videos and stuff on Instagram that I don't post on here. For example, here's a video just basically showing that I bet on Pedro Munoz and he won, which is very nice. So it's kind of going back over my analysis and showing how the fight actually played out. Got some stuff for the Padilla fight, which I thought was a pretty bad decision, so just posted something about that on there. So yeah, check it out. Instagram, link in the description below. Different content on there, and yeah, man, be able to post stuff throughout the week. And I want to get, I haven't got too many followers on there at the moment, so not posting like a lot because not many people get to see it. But if I start to get the followers up, I'll be a lot more active on there, man, when it's definitely, you know, worth posting, so that it benefits more people see it. At the moment it's like, oh, why am I putting all this effort into Instagram when I haven't really got that many followers? But if all you guys go over there, I'll start, you know, doing my best to post some daily content and stuff related to the fights every weekend. So with that being said, let's get into the first fight that I want to talk about this week, which is going to be the main event between Ricky Simon and Yadong Song. So let's start off by taking a look at the odds, and we can see that they're currently in the even money odds range. Got Ricky Simon as a slight favourite, but not a massive difference in the odds. Pretty similar risk to reward ratio. If you take, well, actually not a similar risk to reward ratio, but similar payoff if you're betting either guy. So if we look at the odds on Simon, he's about an average of 1.85, which is minus 118 for an implied probability of 54%. If we take a look at the odds on Song Yadong, he's around an average of 1.95, which is minus 105 for an implied probability of 51%. So Ricky Simon is 30 years old, 5'6", with a 70-inch reach, and Song Yadong, 25 years old, 5'8", with a 67-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same size, roughly the same age. However, Song Yadong is making big improvements from fight to fight, which you'd expect. At 30 years old, Simone is still going to be improving as well. But as he approaches, you know, the mid-30s now, he's going to start to just plateau a little. Whereas Song Yadong still making massive improvements from fight to fight. And that brings me on to really the first thing that I want to talk about in this breakdown. In that, when I first saw that Ricky Simone was fighting Yadong Song, I thought this would be an easy fight for Ricky Simone, and I was kind of blown away when I saw they were in the even money odds range. Like, every once in a while a fight pops up which is in the even money odds range, and I'm like, that's insane. That, like, one of these guys should be a big favourite. So recent examples, when we bet Tommy Fury to beat Jake Paul, it was quite clear that Tommy Fury was by far the better boxer. I thought he should have been the favourite in that fight. Also earlier in the year we bet on Jamal Hill to beat Glover Teixeira. They were in the even money odds range. I would have had Jamal Hill at like a 1.4 or minus 250 personally. So every once in a while a fight in the even money odds range pops up where the odds are really off. But it doesn't happen all that often because, you know, betting sites don't become super profitable from setting inaccurate betting odds, right? It's very unusual you find that amount of value in the odds, but every once in a while you do. And I thought this was going to be another one of those examples because Ricky Simone is obviously a phenomenal offensive wrestler, you know, one of the best wrestlers in the division, and Yadong Song is, you know, from memory, one of these guys that is quite easy to take down and hold down. You go back and watch his fight against Kyler Phillips in particular, he struggled very, very badly on the ground, and Marlon Vieira was also able to have a decent amount of success on the ground against him as well. I also had flashbacks to the Corey Sandhagen fight where Sandhagen was able to put his stamp on some of those rounds with grappling. So, you know, in the back of my mind, having these hazy memories of watching Yadong Song struggle on the ground against like Sandhagen, Phillips, and you know, even Cody Stamen, Marlon Vera, you know, guys like this. You know, in my head I'm thinking, well, Ricky Simone is a much better grappler than any of those guys. This is going to be an easy fight for him. But when I actually researched this one, this is why doing fight research is so important, because if you're working from hazy memories, your mind can play tricks on you. When I went back and watched the footage, I was actually surprised at how good Yadong Song's takedown defense is, which now somewhat explains these guys being in the even money odds range, because while I do think that Ricky Simone will eventually have a decent amount of success with his grappling in this fight, the early stages of this matchup could be really, really difficult for Yadong Song. The early stage of this matchup could be really difficult for Ricky Simone. So obviously it's a classic striker versus grappler matchup. If the fight stays standing, we know Yadong Song's likely to do very well. He's fast, he's technical, and he lands hard, powerful, damaging, impactful shots. You know, Yadong Song's striking is pretty nasty. We know Simone doesn't pose too much of a threat to him on the feet. We also know Ricky Simone is quite bad defensively. You know, we have seen him get knocked out, you know, in the past against Uriah Faber. We've also seen him get rock, drop, wobbled a couple times with how reckless he can be on the feet. You know, he's a tough guy. He is durable, but he's also there to be hit. He also has a tendency to get dinged, because ultimately he's a grappler, he's not a striker. And you know, we also, what happened to Curtis Blades last weekend when he tried to kind of stand and strike with Pavlovich, who's a striker. You know, we all know how that ends. Grapplers like Ricky Simone, Curtis Blades can get themselves into a lot of trouble when they don't stick to their bread and butter. They try and do something else. They try and stand and strike with superior strikers. So if the fight goes to the ground, Simone's going to have the advantage. If it stays on the feet, Yadong Song's going to have the advantage. So when we're breaking this one down, we're really just trying to work out, you know, how likely is it that Simone is going to be able to use a grappling heavy game plan to take Yadong Song down and dominate him. And while the Corey Sandhagen fight doesn't give us all the answers to that question, it does give us some insight into how likely it is that Ricky Simón will be able to use a grappling heavy game plan to beat Yadong Song. So what I'm going to do is show you some footage of Yadong Song's last fight against Corey Sandhagen, so you can get a look at his takedown defense for yourself, and then you can start to make sense of how this fight is likely to go. Corey Sandhagen, Yadong Song. So if we take a look at Yadong Song's takedown defense here, I know that Corey Sandhagen isn't the same level of grappler that Ricky Simón is, but what really stood out to me in this fight was that Corey Sandhagen shoots some really nice and deep double leg takedown entries, but Yadong Song defends him very well, which you kind of expect, right? You know, he's been training at Team Alpha Male for a long time. Team Alpha Male have got a long history of producing, you know, fighters that are extremely difficult to take down and hold down. You know, Uriah Faber, Chad Mendes, you know, TJ Dillashaw, Cody Garbrandt. You know, throughout their careers, even when they started to decline in the tail end of their careers, all these guys were virtually impossible to take down and hold down. And so no surprise that even though Song Yadong's takedown defense wasn't the best when, you know, he was training at Team Alpha Male in his first few years, is starting to get there now. So take a look at this double leg takedown entry here from Corey Sandhagen. So he shoots in there nice and deep on the legs of Song Yadong, and look, Song Yadong does a good job getting his back tight to the cage so he can use the cage of base to defend the takedown. Immediately goes the underhook on the left side, overhook on the right side, and you can just see he's got good balance, strong base, solid takedown defense, doesn't panic, he's calm, and this underhook is obviously making life very, very difficult for Corey Sandhagen. And the underhook is what prevents Sandhagen from getting the takedown, so eventually he has to give up on it. We keep scrolling through, get some more examples for you. Here is another one. Again, nice deep double leg. And another thing that you need to pay attention to is look at how hard Corey is committing to these takedown attempts. He's getting really deep in on the legs and hips of Song, you know, driving through, and yet Song does a really good job of stuffing him. Look at that. Again, gets his back tight to the cage, overhook on the left side, starts the ham fight on the right side, and does a really good job of getting his back off the cage. That's another example. Here's another one. Look at this takedown entry. Sandhagen sets it up with a jab this time. Watch his right hand. There's the jab, comes under, in on a single leg this time. But look at the physicality of Song. Look at the strength. Look at the balance. And he's able to neutralize the threat of the takedown and wind up in top position himself. And actually works for a back take. Doesn't get it. But here's another one. Watch. Entry comes any second now. There it is. But that time Corey had to retreat on it because Song saw it coming so early and started to sprawl out of it that Corey knew he wasn't going to get it. So I don't want to drag this breakdown video out to be super long, but I think you can see from that footage Song Yadong's takedown defense has improved a lot since the days where guys like Kyler Phillips would cause him a problem on the ground. And you know, at the age of just 25, training at a predominantly grappling-based gym, you know, under someone like Uriah Faber, who, you know, built a career off having amazing takedown defense. You know, Song Yadong's takedown defense is only going to be getting better with how young he is. But now we're into the fourth round. Corey Sandhagen obviously fights at a high pace. You know, this fight has been contested at a high pace. Song Yadong's wearing a lot of damage from some nasty elbows that Sandhagen's landed. So obviously in the fourth round you're going to be a lot more tired than the first round, and it's going to be harder to stuff those takedowns. So in round 4 here, Song Yadong's not gassed by any means. You know, you can see there he's still fast hand speed, you know, pretty athletic in this round. But obviously they've been fighting flat out now for 17 minutes. And as a result, Song's going to be easier to take down now than he was earlier in the fight. And there you see Corey hit a nice outside trip, but even into this fourth round, Song's got, you know, enough gas left in the tank to use this butterfly hook to elevate Sandhagen, create enough space for himself to pop back up. And again, I know Ricky Simón is a better offensive wrestler than Sandhagen, but the point I'm trying to make is Song is using all the correct techniques to defend himself in these positions. And then, watch, in this fourth round, Sandhagen shoots a nice double leg there, drives through, but unlike earlier in the fight, where Song had been able to keep his balance, get his back over the cage, defend the takedown in the clinch, you see he's taking big deep breaths here, he's bleeding heavily, the fight's been contested at a high pace, and so now Sandhagen's able to get him down, establish a dominant position, and Song just doesn't have the energy to work his way back up to his feet. But I wanted to show you this fourth round to illustrate that it wasn't really until the fourth round when Song became too tired to defend the takedown attempts, and that was after the fight had been contested at a crazy pace and he'd taken a lot of damage. So my point being, I don't think this is going to be easy for Ricky Simon. I do think that he's a much better offensive wrestler than Sandhagen. Sandhagen tends to shoot a nice takedown attempt, and if you stuff it, he tends to retreat, go back to the middle of the octagon, and starts to just go back to that striking range. Ricky Simon is different in the sense that he will persist, he will chain wrestle, he will be more of that wet blanket style grappling, to keep a hold of you and try and drag you to the ground. But at the same time, he's not going to be able to set his takedowns up as well as Sandhagen did, because he doesn't have the footwork, the movement, the striking of Sandhagen. And so early on, I do think Simon is going to have a tough time here. I do think Simon is going to struggle to get his grappling game going. I think Yadong Song's takedown offense, defensive wrestling, ability to work his way back up to his feet based on the Sandhagen fight is pretty good. So this matchup is really going to depend on at what stage in the fight Yadong Song starts to wear out. At what stage in the fight does he kind of start to lack the energy to work his way back up to his feet like we saw from him in the fourth round against Sandhagen? Because even though the Sandhagen fight was contested at a really high pace, the one thing Simon can do, which Sandhagen couldn't, is persist much harder with the takedown to force Yadong Song to exert more energy defending the takedown up against the cage. Now, having said that, Yadong Song did show a good ability to disengage from the cage when Sandhagen was working for those takedowns. But Ricky Simon's really good at sticking to guys like glue and not letting them off the hook and chain wrestling, which could mean that Yadong Song is going to burn through a lot more energy against Ricky Simon than he did in the Corey Sandhagen fight. Because in the Sandhagen fight, there was a lot of striking, and Song's obviously a striker, so that's more in his comfort zone. You'd expect his cardio to hold up better in a fight that is a predominantly stand-up fight than if Simon just turns this into a grappling match very early on. I think what's absolutely imperative for Ricky Simon in this fight is that he starts fast. In recent weeks, we've seen a few fighters, or a couple of fighters that stand out to me in particular, make huge mistakes when facing opponents who, have a tendency to slow down a lot. The first example being Dustin Jacoby against Mirzakhanov. We all know Mirzakhanov slows down a lot as fights wear on, but Jacoby basically took the first round off, so Mirzakhanov's gas tank held it better. Mirzakhanov did start to gas a lot towards the end of round 2, but by then it was too late for Jacoby to capitalise on it, because he took the first round off and then had to win the second and third rounds in order to take a decision. Had he forced Mirzakhanov to work harder in round 1, Mirzakhanov probably would have gassed earlier in round 2, making it easier for Jacoby to win the second and third rounds. We saw Carl Rosa do exactly the same thing last weekend against Norma Dumont, right? We know Dumont slows down a lot as fights wear on, but Rosa basically took the first round off, allowing Norma Dumont to pace herself. So even though Dumont did gas and struggled in round 3, by then it was too late. Had Carl Rosa forced her to work harder in round 1, we likely would have seen a situation where it was much easier for Rosa to win the second and third round. So Simon cannot make that mistake. He can't afford to take the first and second rounds slow, feel Yadong Song out and grow into the fight. He's got to start hard. He's got to start fast. He's got to make Yadong Song work very hard in the first round so that he's got enough rounds later in the fight, into that third, fourth and fifth round to win a decision if Song does have enough gas in the tank to win the first and second. So very, very important Simone starts strong in this fight. I think if he starts slowly, I think Song Yadong will have enough cardio to win the first, second and third round. So that's critical in this fight. Very interesting fight. So this is one of those matchups where I am finding it really difficult. I don't really lean either way because both guys have such a big advantage where the other is weak. I think it's one of those fights where it's kind of impossible to feel confident either way, because we know if it stays standing, Song's going to do very well. We know if Simone can make him work hard early and implement a grappling heavy game plan, Simone's going to do really well. My main issue with this fight is sometimes Simone doesn't grapple a lot early in fights. Sometimes he spends the first 3, 4, 5 minutes of a fight striking, feeling his opponent out, finding their range. And I don't think he can afford to do that against Yadong Song, because I think if he does that, if he drops the first round and doesn't make Song work very hard, I think Song will have the cardio to win another 2 rounds in the fight, either second, third, fourth or fifth, and he'll take a decision. So it's very difficult for me to lean either way on this one without really knowing what strategy and game plan Simone is going to implement. I really do not feel that good picking a side either way on this one. So I'm really sorry that I can't be more of use to you there, but I'm hoping all the same you found the analysis useful. Now, in terms of the over-under on this one, fight goes with decision, slight underdog odds. Fight doesn't go to decision, favourite odds. I would say that it's more likely the fight does go to a decision, but obviously I don't love the odds. The odds are pretty steep, especially considering how dangerous Song Yadong is. We do see Simone get dinged a lot on the feet. I don't really have a strong feeling either way on the over-under, if I'm honest. The fight is a lot more likely to go to a decision, but the odds are way too steep for me to be interested in that. So in terms of the props on this one, I actually think that's not a bad bet. Yadong Song to win by decision. Odds of 6.50 plus 550. I quite like that as a prop bet, just because even if Simone does have a lot of success with his grappling at some point in the fight, Song Yadong could score enough in the early rounds to give him a chance of winning a decision. He might win the first and second round, have a case for winning the third. Maybe Simone finish strong in the fourth and fifth. I don't think it's that likely Simone will get a finish. He's not really a finisher. Yadong has shown he's absolutely tough as nails. If you look at his record, had the doctor not stopped the fight for the cut against Sandhagen, that fight probably would have gone to a decision. Outside of that, he's gone to plenty of decisions. Simone is a durable guy. He won't be easy to finish. So yeah, I quite like that. Yadong Song to win by decision. Not too bad. I would take that for sure. So now let's break down the next fight. So the next fight I want to break down is Caio Borralho against Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. So this fight is nowhere near as complicated to break down as the fight between Ricky Simon and Yadong Song. If we start off by taking a look at the odds kind of tell us the story on this one, with Borralho being a pretty big favourite at average odds of about 1.27, which is minus 370 for an implied probability of 79%. If we take a look at the odds on Oleksiejczuk, he is a pretty big underdog at average odds of about 3.80, which is plus 280 for an implied probability of 26%. So Borralho is 30 years old, 6'1", with a 75-inch reach, and Oleksiejczuk, 28 years old, 6 foot tall, with a 74-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size, and this truly is an absolute terrible stylistic matchup for Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. The reason why it is such a bad stylistic matchup for him is that Borralho does have two pretty notable weaknesses in his skill set, but Oleksiejczuk isn't that well positioned to exploit either of them. And so, pretty good stylistic matchup for Borralho. So this is another classic striker versus grappler matchup. Mikhail Oleksiejczuk has a very boxing-based style of striking. Caio Borralho, much more well-rounded, can do a bit of everything, but obviously his base is grappling and predominantly Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he's a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but he's got pretty good MMA grappling, pretty good offensive wrestling to go with it. We saw that in his last fight against Makhmud Muradov. Now, Oleksiejczuk's biggest weakness throughout his career is that his takedown offense is pretty bad, and he's pretty weak off his back. And even though he's young at 28 years old and should be improving, his takedown offense and ground game has been a big issue for him throughout his career, and it just doesn't seem to be improving. And so Borralho is actually one of the best grapplers that Oleksiejczuk has faced in his UFC career. You know, if you look at the guys he's been facing since he came into the UFC, none of them are as good as Borralho on the ground. And like I say, we've seen Oleksiejczuk struggle pretty bad on the ground in the past. I think Borralho is going to be able to get this fight to the ground pretty easily. And I also think that when he does, it's going to be utter domination. If the fight stays standing, Borralho is skilled enough to hold his own. You know, Borralho is a good boxer, don't get me wrong, fights at a high pace, reasonably dangerous on the feet. But he doesn't really have like that killer one-shot knockout power. He does have a few finishes, but for the most part, it tends to be when he just overwhelms guys with pressure and they can't handle it, like they just can't find space to breathe in the octagon, he overwhelms them. It's kind of what we had in the Sam Alvey fight. Borralho, on the other hand, can obviously use his grappling to alleviate any pressure that Oleksiejczuk tries to put on him on the feet. And so it's one of those situations where, you know, I'm not saying Oleksiejczuk can't catch Borralho with something on the feet, but it is pretty unlikely. So my two criticisms of Borralho, the two major weaknesses that this guy has got, is that his cardio isn't great, and he does give up position a lot on the ground, hunting for long shot submissions. But this is one of those fights where I don't think either of those things matter. First of all, because I think he can afford to take gambles on the feet, on the ground. I think he can afford to go for some submissions and try to advance position without there being too much risk of being reversed or put on the bottom or put in a worse position. Because Oleksiejczuk is just a very low-level grappler, so I feel like Borralho can kind of make the mistakes he tends to make on the ground, but he can get away with them because of how bad Oleksiejczuk is. A more skilled grappler is going to be able to make Caio Borralho pay for a lot of the mistakes he makes on the ground when he gives up position a lot. I don't think Oleksiejczuk's going to be able to. Even if Borralho does, you know, give up position a few times on the ground, you know, Oleksiejczuk is so bad on the ground that Borralho will probably be able to just take the position back or hit another takedown. So that's not a huge issue. The second issue I have with Borralho is that he does tend to slow down a bit as fights wear on. Well, this isn't an issue for me either, because Oleksiejczuk also slows down as fights wear on. And, you know, in particular, we've seen Oleksiejczuk slow down significantly when he's forced to grapple. You know, his cardio holds up reasonably well in a stand-up fight, but if you make this guy grapple, he does get very tired very quickly. So even though, you know, there are issues with Borralho, I don't think Oleksiejczuk's particularly well positioned to exploit them. As a result, I'd expect Borralho to win this fight really easily. And his advantages are unfortunately baked into the odds with him being a big favourite. But I'd be really surprised if he lost. You guys know me, you know I don't like to bet big favourites in MMA. It's too chaotic of a sport to play that game. And as a result, when we get fights in this odds range, I will often just say, you know, it's dog or pass. If you really want to bet it, bet the underdog. But I don't actually think this is one of those situations where that applies. You know, there's nothing about Oleksiejczuk that appeals to me. I think he's got a puncher's chance and that's it. Maybe he catches Borralho with a big shot on the feet and knocks him out. But outside of that, he probably gets taken down and dominated. And as a result, I'm not interested in betting Oleksiejczuk at all. If you really want to bet the fight, find a way to bet Borralho. But unfortunately, I think the odds are pretty much where they should be on this one. Borralho deserves to be a big favourite. Now, in terms of the prop bets, Borralho by submission, steep favourite odds. So, not much risk to reward ratio in betting that. Those odds are pretty steep. If we look at the odds on the other props, though, what have we got? Odds on Borralho by decision, yeah, also pretty steep. I don't like the props, if I'm honest. In terms of the over-under, again, I would be surprised if this went the distance, just because Oleksiejczuk is at such a low level on the ground, and Borralho will almost certainly get the fight to the ground. I don't see Oleksiejczuk being able to survive 3 rounds on the ground with Borralho. If you look at his record, you can see that his only 2 losses inside the distance in the UFC were both by submission, which kind of tells you everything you need to know about this guy's ground game. He is very bad on the ground. You look at Borralho, plenty of wins by submission. And so if this fight were to go to the ground, I think Oleksiejczuk is going to be in a lot of trouble. So I definitely wouldn't bet the over in this fight. The odds are pretty steep on it not to go to decision as well, which is a shame. But yeah, man, hope you found that breakdown useful. So we just talked about one fight probably being very one-sided. And now we need to talk about another fight that is probably going to be very one-sided. We're going to be breaking down the fight between Rodolfo Vieira and Cody Brundage. Now, on last week's card, we were saying how Brogan Walker must have pissed someone off in the UFC. Because if this were a video game and you were trying to construct a fighter that was the worst stylistic matchup imaginable for Brogan Walker, it would probably come out as a video game character with the same sort of skills that someone like Yasmin Lesindu had. Lesindu was one of the worst stylistic matchups imaginable for Brogan Walker, and we all saw how dominant Lesindu is in that fight. Cody Brundage must also have done something to piss off someone in the UFC, because Rodolfo Vieira is an absolute nightmare of a matchup for him. It is such a bad stylistic matchup for Cody Brundage. I'm not saying it's the worst stylistic matchup ever, but it's fucking up there. I would be amazed if Cody Brundage won this fight. So if we take a look at the odds, we can see that Vieira is a reasonably big favourite at average odds of around 1.41, which is minus 244 for an implied probability of 71%. If we take a look at the odds on Brundage, he's around an average of 3.0, which is going to be plus 200 for an implied probability of 33%. So Brundage is 28 years old, 6 foot tall with a 72-inch reach. Rodolfo Vieira, 33 years old, 6 foot tall with a 73-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same size. Vieira a bit older but very young in his MMA career, so nothing major there. And why is Rodolfo Vieira such a bad stylistic matchup for Cody Brundage? Well, the answer is Rodolfo Vieira is basically the exact same type of fighter as Cody Brundage, just a much better looking, much better version of him. So Cody Brundage has some strengths, he has a lot of weaknesses, but with Rodolfo Vieira, he has the same strengths as Cody Brundage, but his strengths are stronger. He also has the same weaknesses as Cody Brundage, but the weaknesses aren't as bad. And so that's why this is such a bad stylistic matchup for Brundage, because he's basically facing a much better version of himself. So if we talk about how they match up stylistically, obviously they're both primarily grapplers. They are very much outside of their comfort zone when striking. Brundage is slow and sloppy and bad defensively on the feet. Despite knocking out Tracion Gore with a really weird knockout, he doesn't really have much power in his hands, more of a volume striker, and his cardio is very bad. So past round 1, he gets very sloppy on the feet and just doesn't have the power in his hands to hurt his opponents. His hand speed becomes very slow. He becomes even worse defensively. Now, Vieira, his striking is a lot better. He moves well on the feet. He does have a base in grappling, but his footwork's decent, his movement's decent. He's far better defensively than Brundage as well, far better offensively. Now, he also becomes sloppier as the fight wears on and he gets tired. However, because Vieira is the more technical guy, when they both start to slow and become sloppy on the feet, Vieira should perform much better, simply because he's better defensively, he's more dangerous offensively, he's more technical, so he poses more of a threat to Brundage when they both start to get tired. Now, on the ground, there are levels and levels and levels and levels between these two. Both these guys are primarily grapplers, but they're also a little cursed in the sense that the more they grapple, the faster they get tired, which is a huge problem in most of their fights, because if they don't get a submission win early with their grappling, they inevitably tend to fade hard in rounds 2 and 3. And that's the Achilles heel. That's the big weakness for both these two. But that kind of negates itself in this matchup, because for the first time, really, they're both facing someone that slows down at an equal rate that they do. And because of that, their actual skill level becomes very important in a matchup like this. Because if you think about it logically, if Rodolfo Vieira is this super high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, when he faces like an average level MMA grappler like Anthony Hernandez, he's going to have a huge advantage over Hernandez on the ground when he's fresh. But when he gets tired, the skill gap closes in round 2, and Hernandez can start to have some success on the ground because he's going to be the fresher fighter. He's going to have more energy. And then by the 3rd round, Hernandez is going to have a lot of success on the ground because Vieira will be too gassed to make the most of his superior technique. That's not the case with Cody Brundage, though, because with Vieira being a much better grappler than Brundage, when they go to the ground in round 1, Vieira's going to dominate Brundage. And then they're both going to get a bit tired. And so when they go to the ground in round 2, even though Vieira is tired, he's still going to have a huge advantage over Brundage because Brundage is going to be just as tired. And the same goes into the 3rd round. So this is a terrible, 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 terrible stylistic matchup for Cody Brundage. Because even though Rodolfo Vieira has weaknesses, Brundage isn't particularly well equipped to exploit them because he has the same weaknesses. And so, essentially, Rodolfo Vieira is just a better version of Cody Brundage. So, what does that mean from a betting point of view? Well, similar to Oleksiejczuk, there is absolutely nothing that appeals to me about betting on Cody Brundage in this fight. I'm just not interested. It is such a difficult stylistic matchup for him, and something crazy would have to happen in order for Brundage to win this fight. You know, crazy things have happened, right? He kind of pulled out a couple of fluky wins against Dalcha Lungambula and Tresean Gore when he was struggling bad against both guys. So I'm not saying it can't happen. Just saying it's not that likely based on, you know, how they match up stylistically. So if you really want to bet this fight, you've got to take Mr. Rodolfo Vieira. Now, in terms of the over-under on this one, I would be surprised if this one went to a decision, just because both guys have such bad cardio. I think it'll get to the point where one of them will be too tired to defend themselves on the feet, and then the other one can get a finish. But unfortunately, that is baked into the odds. You know, very, very steep favourite odds on the fight not to go to a decision. So I wouldn't be betting that, but I would be surprised if it went a distance. Now, in terms of the props on this one, you know, you can see that Rodolfo Vieira loves his submissions. I'm guessing that the odds on submission are going to be pretty terrible. They are. Yeah, I'm not too sure. None of the props are really jumping out at me here. I would give those a miss, boys. None of them are particularly interesting to me. So, just grab a quick drink. And let's get into the next fight. So now I want to break down the fight between Julian Erosa and Fernando Padilla. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Julian Erosa is the favourite at average odds of around 1.75, which is going to be minus 133 for an implied probability of 57%. We take a look at the odds on his opponent, Padilla. He's around an average of 2.15, which is going to be plus 115 for an implied probability of 47%. So Julian Erosa is 33 years old, 6'1", with a 74.5-inch reach, and Fernando Padilla is 26 years old, 6'1", with a 76-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same size. They've got similar body types as well, being long, lanky, lean strikers. But we can see that Erosa is 7 years older than Padilla, which does give Padilla around a 67% chance of winning. The younger fighter wins around 67% of the time when there's a 7-year age gap in a fight. On top of that, this is one of the lighter weight classes, so 33 years old is quite old for a featherweight. Erosa's also had almost 40 pro fights, so 33 years old with 40 pro fights in the featherweight division. It's going to be the equivalent of like 30 years old in the welterweight, middleweight division. So Erosa's getting very old for a featherweight now. So we got to keep that in mind. Erosa is at that stage in his career where he could start to decline pretty quickly and overnight, and suddenly we know Father Time is undefeated. Padilla's also making his UFC debut. And one of the rare examples of a debutant these days that didn't come off the Contender Series. He was picked up a long time ago, actually, over 2 years ago now, around 2 years ago now, on looking for a fight back when Dana was doing that show. I don't know if he's still doing that show. Okay, so Erosa versus Padilla. Well, what's interesting about this fight is that both guys are very similar. They've both got lean, lanky frames, and they're both predominantly strikers. Padilla is more of a boxer and Erosa is more of a kicker, but for the most part pretty similar styles and pretty similar stances as well. They both like to fight with their hands pretty low. Now, in terms of how they match up stylistically, this is one of those fights where I do worry a little for Erosa in this one, only because whenever you've got a striker with a boxing-based style of striking and a fighter with a kicks-based style of striking, the boxer often has a lot of success because it's a lot easier to punch someone in the face than it is to kick him in the head. And that's like the fundamental reason. When you've got two guys exchanging and one of them's looking for headshots with boxing combinations and the other one's looking to counter off kicks, it just makes life a lot easier for the boxer. It also doesn't help Erosa's case that he does fight with his hands pretty low. He is bad defensively, so he does tend to struggle a little bit against boxers. If you guys go back and watch his fight against Sean Woodson, I know it was a long time ago, but Woodson lit him up on the feet, did a really good job of using his boxing against him. And so it's one of those situations where even though Padilla is not a particularly good boxer, certainly not the level of Sean Woodson, because he does have a predominantly boxing-based style of striking, I could see him causing Erosa a lot of problems. Having said that, Padilla is not particularly good defensively himself. Doesn't have much power in his hands. He's more of a volume striker. And, Erosa's got the UFC experience. He's a better grappler than Padilla. He does throw a more diverse range of strikes. Erosa will mix up his boxing, his kicking game, whereas Padilla, for the most part, is just a pure boxer. And so this is one of those matchups where, this is a big step up in competition for Padilla. He's never faced anyone at the level that Julian Erosa is at. But there are opportunities for him with his boxing to cause Erosa some problems. Again, this is one of those fights where I don't really have a strong read on it, because I will use the example that we recently had of Bruna Brazil, where if you look at footage of Bruna Brazil before she came into the UFC, She managed distance very well. She was very technical, had great footwork, great movement, looked very good defensively. And then she faced that step up in competition in the UFC and just basically got walked down and blasted for the entire duration of the fight. Padilla could be the same against these lower level guys outside of the UFC. You know, he looks very sharp on the feet. His boxing looks good, but there have been a few flashes in his matchups where guys have really taken the fight to him, forced him to engage, and he didn't look comfortable at all. He didn't like it. So he might be one of these guys that performs reasonably well against a lower level of opponent, but he may really struggle to make that jump and that step up now. And we know that Erosa is tough as nails, game as hell, has great cardio, pushes a really high pace. I'm not sure if Padilla is ready for that. We're going to find out this weekend. So yeah, this is one of those fights I don't really have a strong lean on either way. I will go with Erosa for being the more well-rounded guy. You know, throws a more diverse range of strikes. He's got great cardio. You can throw his grappling into the mix. He's more experienced. It's Padilla's UFC debut against a really tough guy. You know, they're not starting Padilla off slowly here. He's straight off to the races facing, you know, a tough, experienced, well-rounded veteran in Erosa. I don't have a strong feeling on this one, though. So yeah, I don't have a strong lean either way. Now, in terms of the over-under, I do think it's reasonably likely this fight goes the distance. Both guys are, for the most part, volume strikers. Neither of them has a ton of power in their hands. They are both bad defensively, but neither of them are particularly dangerous offensively. For that reason, if I were going to bet the over-under, I would bet on this fight to go to a decision. I think the odds on the fight not to go to a decision here are way too steep. They're probably based on the fact that when you look at their records, not many of Erosa's fights go to a decision. When you look at Padilla's record, though, you know, not a lot of his fights go to a decision either. But styles make fights, and both these guys are volume strikers. They don't have a lot of power in their hands, and as a result, it's more likely these two get into, you know, 15-minute kickboxing match. Someone wins a decision. So I would lean much more heavily towards the over there. Plus, it does give you a better risk to reward ratio at underdog odds. Now, in terms of the prop bets on this one, Erosa by decision is what I would go for. I won't be betting it myself. I'm not the biggest fan of prop bets. But if I were to bet a prop, it would be Erosa by decision. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. So at the very beginning of the video, I said that I would have a bet to share with you on this main card. And you've been patiently waiting, and here it is. I am going to be betting Waldo Cortes-Acosta this weekend for reasons that I'll explain in this video. It's not a particularly confident bet, but I do think Cortes-Acosta is worth a bet here. I think his odds are pretty generous. So we will now break down the fight between Marcos Rogério de Lima and Waldo Cortes-Acosta. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Marcos Rogério de Lima is a pretty big favourite at average odds of about 1.57, which is going to be minus 175 for an implied probability of 64%. We take a look at the odds on his opponent, Waldo Cortes-Acosta. He's around an average of 2.50, which is plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%. So De Lima is 37 years old, 6'1" with a 75-inch reach, and Waldo Cortes-Acosta, 31 years old, 6'4" with a 78-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same size. Bit of a difference in age though. 31 years old makes Cortes-Acosta, I'm just going to call him Acosta, otherwise I'm going to keep getting tongue-tied and twisted with my words. Acosta is very young for a heavyweight at 31 years old, so he should be making big improvements from fight to fight. De Lima, on the other hand, is going to be 38 years old in 4 weeks' time, which means he's going to be declining from fight to fight. On top of that, he's had almost 30 pro fights. He's been knocked out a bunch of times in his career, taken a ton of damage. De Lima's going to have a lot of miles on the clock, and we know Father Time is undefeated. It's only a matter of time before De Lima starts to decline, and Cortes-Acosta is young, hungry, should be making big improvements from fight to fight, will be a lot more durable than De Lima, and also has a pretty good gas tank for the heavyweight division. So why do I like Cortes-Acosta in this matchup? Well, I've been quite impressed with him, to be honest, in his couple of fights in the UFC so far. I think the reason why he's the underdog in this matchup is that a bit of wiki capping's gone into the odds, where people have looked at him go to a decision against Jared Vandeira and Chase Sherman, who are quite low-level heavyweights, and they haven't really appreciated the decent range of skills that Cortes-Acosta showed us in those fights. He's got good footwork, good movement, a good jab, fast hand speed, technical striking, great leg kicks. And De Lima is one of these guys that does have a tendency to start really strong and then fade quite hard in the second and third round. And Cortes-Acosta, on the other hand, is one of these guys that can fight at a pretty good pace for all 3 rounds. No matter what pace the fight is contested at, Cortes-Acosta is one of these guys that can go pretty hard for all 3. So I think this fight for Cortes-Acosta is going to come down to, can he make it through the first round? Because we know in round 1, De Lima's offensive wrestling's good, his ground game's dangerous, he's very, very powerful on the feet, carries big knockout power in his hands, devastating power in his kicks. But we've seen Waldo Cortes-Acosta in a couple wars now in the UFC. I know that Sherman and Vandeira are nowhere near as dangerous as De Lima. We've seen him eat big shots in both fights, take a lot of damage in both fights. You know, both these fights were wars. They were knockdown, drag out, back and forth wars. And Waldo Cortes-Acosta, even being quite young in his MMA career, was able to hang in there, tough it out, and dog out a win against 2 really tough, durable opponents. So whenever De Lima faces anyone, because of how dangerous he is on the ground and on the feet, he's going to pose a significant threat to everyone in the division in round 1. But I feel like it's always the same with De Lima. If you can just make it through that first round, he doesn't really offer very much in the second and third round. And based on Cortes-Acosta's past 2, I keep getting tongue twists again. Based on Acosta's 2 fights in the UFC so far, I think he's tough enough and well-rounded enough to weather the early storm, drag De Lima into the second and third rounds, and find a way to win the fight. So at underdog odds, I really like Cortes-Acosta in this fight because he's got better cardio than De Lima, he throws a higher volume of strikes than De Lima, he's a lot younger than De Lima, and I think he's tough enough to hang in there, get the fight into round 2 and 3, where he can start to take over. Now, if he does get into the second and third round, De Lima's obviously going to still hit very hard, but what we notice from De Lima in the rounds 2 and 3 is that his volume falls off a cliff. So when he's very aggressive, gets very busy in the first round, throws a lot of volume in the first round, we know that if you take him into the second and third, he throws significantly less. Cortes-Acosta, on the other hand, throws a decent volume of jabs, decent amount of leg kicks, and with De Lima standing quite flat-footed and stationary, I think Cortes-Acosta can cause him a lot of problems with his leg kicks and kind of outwork him and outpoint him from behind the jab. So yeah, I really like Cortes-Acosta in this fight at underdog odds. I think he's a solid bet. And if he can make it out of round 1, which won't be easy, but if he can make it out of round 1, should do pretty well here. And hopefully he comes through for us. So if we take a look at the over-under on this one, I do think it is very likely this fight does not go to a decision. I think De Lima will either get a first round finish or he'll become too tired to defend himself in the second and third round, and then Cortes-Acosta will likely take him out. But the odds are pretty steep, so I won't be betting that. At big favourite odds, that is not interesting to me at all. I wouldn't be betting on fight to go to a decision here. Ultimately, if you look at De Lima's record, there aren't many of his fights that have gone to a decision. He's gone to a decision 1, 2, 3 times in his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Gone to a decision 3 times in his last 10 fights. So probably not that smart to bet on the fight to go to a decision here. I would give that one a miss. Now, in terms of prop bets, I do like Cortes-Acosta to win in round 3. The odds are pretty... No, they're not. Yeah, I do like Cortes-Acosta winning round 3. Odds are 13.0 plus 1,200. Because if Cortes-Acosta can drag De Lima into the third round, I think De Lima will be too tired to defend himself. I think there's a pretty good chance Cortes-Acosta finds a way to get him out of there, which would be very, very nice. And yeah, I think that's a pretty good bet in my opinion. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, please leave a comment below and let me know. Hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. We're now going to be breaking down the fight between where is he? Where are the odds for this one? There we go. We're now going to be breaking down the fight between Josh Quinlan and Trey Waters. So we can see that Josh Quinlan is the favourite at average odds of around 1.59, which is going to be minus 169 for an implied probability of 63%. If we take a look at the odds on his opponent, Trey Waters, he is around an average of 2.45, which is going to be plus 145 for an implied probability of 41%. So Quinlan is 30 years old, 6 foot tall with a 72-inch reach, and Trey Waters is 28 years old, 6 foot 5 with a 77-inch reach. Both guys roughly the same age, but a fairly big difference in size. So this is going to be one of those matchups where I definitely want to see the stare down, because you never really can gauge the size difference between two fighters from looking at the tail of the tape. But with Waters being 6 foot 5 and having a 5-inch reach advantage over Quinlan, there is the potential for there to be a massive size difference in this matchup, which would obviously favour Waters. But stylistically, based on past performances, it's a pretty good stylistic matchup for Josh Quinlan, to be fair. The reason why it is a very good stylistic matchup is that Trey Waters is one of these guys that has like a traditional karate stance where he fights with his hands down very low and he wants to chip away at his opponent, boxing, really technical strikes. Quinlan, on the other hand, is a smaller, more powerful, compact boxer that has a really tight, defensive guard. Very good defensively, very good offensively. He's very technical, got good power in his hands, lands big damaging shots, and he looks a lot more durable than Trey Waters to me as well. When you look at Trey Waters, he's one of these guys that against these lower level strikers on the regional circuit, he's very good at using his karate and his length to kind of chip away at them from a safe distance, and he kind of overwhelms guys with his trickiness and his technique. But Quinlan hits very hard, he's good defensively, he's very good at covering the distance quickly and landing big, powerful combinations. And I just think with the way these two match up, I think Quinlan's going to pose far more of a threat to Waters than Waters does to Quinlan. The size difference is a concern. However, what we do see from a lot of abnormally long, tall guys in their divisions is that they're often a little bit slow to react, and I definitely see that in Trey Waters. He fights with his hands down low, and I've seen him get dinged quite a lot of times in his past fights. Now against these lower level guys, he's kind of getting away with it, but Quinlan has got major power in his hands and really good boxing. So with him being such a good boxer, Waters fighting with his hands down low, I think Quinlan can cause him a lot of problems on the feet. Quinlan is also the better grappler out of the two, which gives him another advantage in this matchup, which, very, very nice to have. So, yeah, pretty good stylistic matchup this for Josh Quinlan. Obviously, Waters is making his UFC debut. He's only fought a very low level of opponent up until this point in his career. So not tons of footage available on him against a decent level of opponent. Not tons of footage on Quinlan either. A lot of his fights have ended very quickly. But stylistically, I think Quinlan's power, his physicality, his boxing, I think it's going to cause Trey Waters quite a few problems here. So if we take a look at the over-under on this one, I do think this fight is very unlikely to go to a decision. Like I say, Waters is quite bad defensively. Quinlan hits like a truck. Unfortunately, the odds are reflective of that. I'd be surprised if it went the distance, so I wouldn't take that. If we take a look at the props on this one, Quinlan by knockout or TKO is the only prop I would consider. I do think he's going to brutally knock Waters out, if I'm honest. But the odds are very steep on that. Big favourite odds, so the props are a bit dead on that fight. I would give them a miss. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you like it, or like these breakdowns, you want to watch more, head on over to my website, UFC.com, where you can find breakdown videos for all the prelim matchups on this card. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. Let me know your bets. Have a great weekend. Hope you crush it. Hope you make loads of money. Nice one, guys. Take care. I will see you all very soon. Don't forget to check out my Instagram. Thank you very much. Bye.